Phil and Will, the Survivor specialists, are back.
That's right. And today we have Sunday Burquest on here with us from Survivor Millennials versus Gen X. She's going to be talking all about hopefully her master plan that we heard so much about in the last few days. Hopefully Brett doesn't overtake us in the chat and get too much revenge on you. But this should be absolutely great. Thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah,
and coming on.
Yeah, even though I had to bribe you with pizza, I'm glad I'm here.
Hey, we didn't accept the bribe. That has to be known.
True. I would have sent it, though. I would have.
There's no $5 pizza places out in LA, so that was never going to happen.
Thanks. You need to move to Minnesota.
I think so. So yeah, I guess we've been starting off. I mean, we've been starting off all of these interviews with just from the beginning. It's always a good place to start. So, if you want to talk about, you were a huge fan of the show coming in, correct?
Yeah, we've been watching since season 1 as a family, and there's not many shows your whole family actually likes to watch together, and Survivor was one of them. So yeah, almost 17 years, I guess, we've been watching.
Okay, so 17 years of watching and loving the show, and you get out there on day one, and what's happening?
Complete panic. I'm thinking, I'm running around like, how do I make an alliance? I don't know how to make an alliance. What am I watching for 17 years? I don't know what I'm doing. So it was, honestly, I was just so scared I was going to get voted off first. Only because of my, not like a huge challenge beast or anything. And my thought was, all I need is one person that's more annoying than I am weak. And
you got it.
I got it. And I figured after a few days you have time to build relationships, so then you're a little safer unless you completely bomb something. But I'm like, the first 3 days you don't have time to build any kind of a relationship that would keep you there if you screwed up a challenge.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think you're the first one to tell us that you were actually nervous. It seems like everybody else was super excited. And obviously I'm assuming you were excited, but we haven't heard nervous yet.
They're lying. They're lying. Everyone's nervous.
Yeah, I think Jessica had her eye situation. She thought maybe people would vote her out because of that. Did you ever consider that Sunday? Were you looking at Jessica being like, hey, she's, might be contagious. She might be injured. Maybe we should get rid of her.
No, I really didn't, because we were allies then, and I just really felt bad for her. And I'm not a germaphobe, so I wasn't even nervous about catching it. No, I felt bad for her. That wasn't a flag to me at all. Paul going down, now that's a little bit different. But I never felt that way about Jessica with her eyes. I just really felt bad for her.
So with Paul going down, that was like a we need to get rid of him type moment because he was weaker?
It added to the let's say it added another dimension to making the decision.
Okay.
Because it's like, we kind of told ourselves, we're kind of doing him a favor because we're helping protect him from hurting himself.
That's a good way. Yeah, that's a good way to spin it.
Yeah. I mean, it was in our minds for sure, Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. All right. So go ahead. Will, did you have something there? Sorry, I didn't know who came through.
No, go ahead. You got it.
No, I was just going to say, okay, so then Paul goes down, and that was obviously a huge, huge moment, and it looked like a defining moment with you and Jessica, and then the next week it really defined it with you and Jessica. Now, we got Jessica's take, we got Brett's take, and I think, Brett was pretty much telling us, his take was the truth, but what happened with all of this, with Brett and then the Jessica, Lucy shenanigans?
It was total shenanigans. So basically, we had our tight group of 6, and Paul had said to Jess a couple of different times, not just once, if the guys want to do an all-guy alliance, you guys are on your own. And you saw once, but he actually said it to her another time. And so that is why Lucy and I agreed with her to go for voting Paul out. Now, the plan got a little bit different after the fact, and we really never were able to recover from that. I'll take part of the blame in that, but, I worked really hard at making things right with Chris and Brett, and, I told them I did it. I mean, there was no denying I also blindsided Paul. There's no question about that. But we just felt like Jessica was really strategic and a good player. And we just, the recovery just didn't happen the way that it probably could or should have.
Yeah, it was impressive how you were you flipped and voted Paul, and then you were right back in their good graces very quickly, and then Jessica kind of became the target. And I'm sure Brett is loving this in the chat, saying that the guys thing that was going to happen, because he was pretty adamant that was not the case.
I know. And they said to me that when Paul said, "You ladies are on your own," what he was referring to were Chris and Brett. And that could have been the case. It really doesn't matter because we blindsided him anyways, whether it was right or wrong. And in hindsight, probably wasn't the right move at the time. But, every move you make, you're making with the information that you have at that very moment. And you're making decisions that you hope just move you one spot closer to the end. So,
yeah. Okay, so Brett was wrong, though, and that was stated. That was definitely something that was in your guys' heads, at least, was this all guys thing.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And whether it was true and whether Paul says he didn't mean it that way, and he might not have. But that is what we thought, and that's why we made the decision. And, because David and Ken were ready, and willing to go, it just all came together that way.
Yeah, and you throw the injury on top of it, kind of, it was the perfect time to get rid of him.
Yeah, probably not, though, in hindsight. But at the time, based on the information I had at that moment, it seemed like the right move.
Okay. So then going forward, you end up getting back into Brett and Chris's good graces. And you did it pretty well, to the extent where you and Brett were, as Brett put it in our interview, a power couple pretty much through the entire game. Why do you think that it worked out so well that you were able to get Brett's trust back? Because that doesn't normally happen, even though you might make amends, but never to the extent that you really did. Why do you think you were able to do that, especially then going to Ikabula and the two of you are there, just the only two Gen Xers?
Well, I think it was a number of things. One, he didn't admit that he was a cop, but I thought he was, and my brother's a cop. So I automatically felt close to him, or like I could trust him. He also reminded me a lot of my husband. And when you extend yourself and put your trust in someone else, then you're telling them that they can trust you. And we actually, in casting, before we could ever talk to each other, I felt like he was my friend. I came home and I go, there's this guy with dark hair. He looks like a cop, and I know I'm going to try and work with him. So I think you put that together with the fact that I just spent a lot of time with Brett. And then it took a lot longer for Chris. He was pretty ticked at me. He still didn't talk to me till like the next day in the afternoon. And it was so funny because in my confessional that day, I was like crying. I'm like, Chris won't talk to me. And all this stuff. And actually Ken gave me a big hug. I was by the fire and I was crying, and Ken is like, this game was hard. I'm like, yeah, it sucks. And we had a nice moment there, but I don't know. I worked at it with both Chris and Brett, and I'm not saying that Jessica didn't. I'm just saying I put as much effort as I could because I felt like that was going to be the best direction for my game. And I went into the game with my strategy was to go align with two alpha males and go with them into the merge so that they'd be a target before I would. And I needed to keep my two alpha males.
So is that part of the master plan, or was that kind of before the game you thought about that? And then Will was talking about this master plan. Did you come up with your master plan as the game came along, or is that part of it?
No, that wasn't part. That was part of my strategy from the beginning coming in. I'm not going to say that was the master plan. That doesn't come till down the line. But going into the game, that was definitely my strategy. I told him that in casting. And I just felt like if I could go and let two alpha males lead, take the hit for the leads, be the bosses, be the ones in charge. And that actually no one knows unless they know you at home. They don't know how you're actually playing, because at home I'm in charge of everything. And everybody puts me in charge of everything. So for me to go in and purposefully not take charge of anything was me like totally holding back, and was gameplay for me. Because my natural self wants to tell everybody what to do. You go do that, you get this. And I couldn't let myself do any of that. And I actually overcorrected in that.
So do you think by being put on Gen X that made you a little bit, like, also take a little bit more of a step back? Because it seemed like you had huge personalities there, especially with somebody like Paul who wanted it, Rachel who seemed like she was just trying to do anything, Lucy who we've heard was very, very gung-ho. Do you think that caused you to take more of a step back?
It did. And then I just feel like over the seasons, I saw time and time again, the person that put themselves in the leadership position always had a target on them back. Always, always, always. And I was determined that I wasn't going to let my strong personality, which you didn't get to see, I was determined to not let that override my best judgment in my leadership role on the tribe.
Okay, and that's something we obviously have to talk about is your edit from, you know, it comes across as, yeah, exactly. It comes across weak. Your boot episodes, you don't even get a confessional. But from everybody we've talked to, they said Sunday got absolutely screwed because she totally was making moves and had these plans going forward. And what was it? The Ken, when you told them Ken, everybody's saying that was all you. So why do you think, like, what do you think happened there? And what were some of the moves that you made early on that like people just didn't get to see?
Well, first of all, here's the thing is I'm a strong personality, but I'm not gonna like go do a big confrontation. I'm not gonna stir up a bunch of drama. That's just not me. And second of all, when I was doing my confessionals and other things, you know, I was a young adult pastor, okay? So I'm pastor of millennials. And the whole time I was there, I'm thinking they're going to hear everything I say and see everything I do. So I was so conscious of what I was saying, like in my confessionals and how I was doing things because of the example or whatever you want to say. I didn't have a problem lying because that's part of the game. I just felt like how I was going to go about it was going to be in a certain way. And so I wasn't going to be the one that was out there starting a big drama thing, starting a big fight, because that's not who I am. But I think people forget that when you're making moves, it takes more than one person. You need 2 or 3 people to make a decision. And I was in on every vote. We were making decisions together. Nobody makes one vote by themselves. And a lot of times it gets this like, well, who got credit and who didn't get credit? But some of the times, not one person gets the credit. It's more than one person. And so there was just different times where it was like, okay, I think we should do this. But if you don't want a target on your back, you're not going to sit there and say, this has to be my way. The quickest way to get in trouble in the game is to get stuck in your own plan and not be adaptable to other people's plans. So, you know, with the Gen X tribe, we had the Paul. Well, Rachel one was, you know. Okay.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah. Okay.
Easy. Yeah.
So, and Rachel's a great person, you know, but in the game, not so much. Then we had the Paul vote, and then, you know, going to vote for Jessica, I had a clear decision to make. Do I, you know, those guys kind of planned it during the day and they weren't going to tell me until right before tribal. So I didn't find out until, I don't know, 20 minutes, 10 minutes before tribal that they were voting Jess. So earlier in the day when I told her Cece, that's what I really thought the vote was. Well, then 10 minutes before tribal, I've got a choice to make. Am I going to stay with these guys? Well, what I was told were the numbers were going to go Jess, right? So if I go to tribal and I don't vote for Jess, in my mind, Jess goes home and I come back to no Chris and Brett. So I had no choice. Plus, I'm trying to win trust back with Chris and Brett. I'm thinking Jess is gone and I'm not going to have Chris and Brett either. So I had to vote that way. And, you know, obviously we know what happened. And so we get back and I'm like, Jess, I thought you were going to be gone and I wasn't going to have an alliance when I got back. And then we get to the swap. So we get to Ikabula, and, of course we're nervous because it's 4-2, but this is where my social game really comes into play because I work with millennials, and I knew if I could get to some millennials, it would do me good in my game.
So are you the first person to actually be disappointed that it was millennials versus Gen X?
I don't know that I was disappointed, but when he said millennials versus Gen X, everyone's like, oh, that's nice. And on the inside, I'm like, yes. I'm like, this is awesome for me, because if I can get over to some millennials, assuming there's going to be a swap, it's going to be in 4 or 5 votes anyway. So it's like, if I can just make it to a point where there's a swap, I can, I know I can build relationships with millennials. And that's what I did. I put in hours and hours and hours, and you don't get to see any of that, but my relationship with Hannah was very strong. Great relationship with Michaela. I spent hours with Will by the bonfire, hours with Jay by the bonfire. And is that going to make the show? No, but it's all game and it's all strategy, and it was a big part of my game was solidifying those relationships, because the more you solidify, the more you have to work with further down the line.
Yeah. And I'll just say, and I think that this is, what happened with season 32. And of course, everybody's going to roll their eyes when I say this, but Michelle wins. So they had to show a lot more of her. And it seemed like everything she did was just social and there were no big moves. You get 7th place. And it's almost like, well, we don't have to put in that moment or that moment or that moment. But everybody seems like they wanted those moments in there. Because it just feels like everybody had some sort of attachment to you that just doesn't come through at all. Yeah, and it was, I'm telling you guys, it was so hard to watch. Really? Well, you can't imagine. Think of how hard, first of all, this is your huge dream. You work so hard, you get the dream, you get to go on the show, you play the game, you're making moves, you have all these relationships, you have a perception of what happened in the game. Then you get home and you watch it, and week after week, you don't see any of it. Mm-hmm. It was
that must be pretty crazy.
It was so hard to watch. And every week I would get my hopes up and be like, well, they have to show me, Chris, and Brett this week because they can't show this without us. And then they have to show, and it just kept going week after week. And, everyone's like, she's not playing the game, she's not doing anything, or they would show it. And the fact is that if I were sitting in the final 3, they would have had to show a lot more and build up more of my character. But because I wasn't, I think it was easy enough to focus on the other big characters that I was playing with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, I totally understand why that would be frustrating. And a lot of the times we've heard in the past, some of the invisible edits, it was either they were pains to production, or they just Jeff just was annoyed by them or anything. But it seems like you were giving information all the time. At Tribal Council, Jeff would ask you a question. You were giving answers, full blown. I thought I was. I never got yelled at for not giving, because he'll tell you. Mm-hmm. If you're not giving an answer, then you know it. And I was not a pain to production ever. They love me because I'm so nice and I follow all the rules. So, and I did answer questions. Actually, sometimes I answered too much. In Tribal Council, so I can't figure it out. It's been really, I just have to keep focusing on the memories I made playing the game and not worry about the edit part, I guess. But I'm working my butt off.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, and you can tell us what we didn't see here. Yeah, that's why you're here. So I guess what's if you could have one scene that you're where was that scene? Why did I see that on TV? What scene would that be where you're man, that was a lot of fun, or that was a big moment that I really liked out there and that it just didn't make the cut?
Well, for one, when Gen X did, when we did the second immunity challenge with Gen X, it was called the Ocean, when we swam in, went up the cargo nets and jumped off. And Gen X won that day. We won the reward. It was steak and no. It was just immunity. It wasn't a reward challenge. It was just immunity. It was the second one. Okay, that challenge was the 4-year anniversary of the day I got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay.
And my confessional beforehand, before the challenge, you're like, what would it mean to you if you won the challenge today? And the producer's crying, the cameraman's crying, the boom guy's crying. And I said it would be like, I'm crying. It would be like kicking cancer in the ass. To get diagnosed and 4 years later, win a challenge on Survivor, and it never made the air. I mean, my confessionals about it, there was a deleted scene they released the day after. But later that night, I told my tribe members, which was like a huge moment. And, you know, and it was frustrating because I felt like so many people's personal stories were shown this season and that were all meaningful. You knew about Jay's mom, and you knew obviously about Adam's mom, and Zeke and Brett, and all these personal things that were going on. And it was frustrating because I didn't understand why couldn't a confessional or even me telling my tribe mates about it have made the air.
Yeah.
That was frustrating. And even after the game, when I did my interview with like Rob on Rob as a podcast, he's like, did you ever think about telling them that you had breast cancer? I'm like, I did. You know? So that was frustrating to me. I mean, there's a ton of funny moments and just stupid stuff. But, for me, that was hard. And especially because I feel like it would have given a lot of other women just inspiration, or anybody. Like, you can go through this horrible thing just 4 years ago and still be out here competing on Survivor. I wish that would have made the air.
Yeah, that sounds like it would have been a great moment. Yeah, out on Survivor and winning a challenge. That would have been awesome.
And I'm very confused as to why they wouldn't show something like that, especially if you go all the way to the episode before the finale. Give us something. I mean, that's a phenomenal story in itself, and who's not going to root for somebody who's overcome all of that and then goes out and wins? And as you're going through the game, I'm confused.
You and me both. You and me both. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we can talk about the time on Ikabula where you said that there was a lot of your social game, and we saw some of you. I think when the Ikabula tribe first came to be, we did see more of you. I believe. But what was it like when it was you and Brett? Were you just like paranoid as soon as that happened? I know you were nervous on day one, but what's going on as soon as you hit that beach?
Well, really nervous, of course. And I guess we just looked at each other and it's like, okay, we have our work cut out for us. Of any two people to be in a situation where you're 2 to 4, I think we were the best case scenario because both of us were just so likable. And both of us were good at the social game. Both of us were good at talking and talking and talking and talking. And so for any of them to be stuck 2 to 4 like that, really, it was it was set up for Brett and I the best. But, I think the first day we were just like, what's going to happen? This sucks, but I think pretty quickly by day 2, by the time Michaela lit that fire and we finally had fire together, I felt like we were really bonding with those 4. And yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, who was the first to approach you, or who was the first one that you approached as like you're in?
That's a good question. Probably Hannah. And probably just because, I don't know. It's easy to connect with a girl right away. I wasn't sure how to take Jay right away, and Will's pretty quiet. And Michaela's just, Michaela. So I probably started with Hannah, and then us 3 girls talked a lot. I mean, I guess, yeah. I remember my first really big connection with Will was in the middle of the night. I went and tried to, I think we both went to the bathroom or something, but we were in an area by ourselves in the dark in the middle of the night, and we started talking, and we probably talked for an hour before we went back to camp, and that was probably my first really big connection with Will.
Okay. So, and then, yeah, because it's funny that you say Hannah, and then Hannah's one who doesn't vote with you when you guys vote out Michaela.
I didn't have a choice in that matter. That was not up to me. Brett knew about the plan throughout the day, which I didn't realize until later, but we weren't told, or so I thought, until like 30 minutes before we had to leave for tribal. And, you know, I was in the position where Will and Jay were dictating. So when they say we're not telling Hannah, I'm certainly, I'm getting saved. I'm certainly not going to go chance anything that's going to screw that up at that point. I had tried to plant a little tiny seed with Hannah and Michaela, like, hey, girls could work together, and but those four were just so tight, they wouldn't give me an inch. And I tried, had I been able to get Hannah and Michaela to vote with me, I'm sure, Brett would have voted with us, and we would have taken out Jay and his idol. But I didn't know about his idol, at the time, but Michaela did. So had she even continued or entertained the idea with me, then we could have been like, okay, we're getting rid of, Jay and the idol, but then I would have had Michaela to deal with later. So, I tried to do that little girl thing. But before we ever went to the challenge, the day that we lost, Jay looked over at me from across the camp and he mouthed at me, "You're not going anywhere." And that was before we even left to the challenge. So I don't know if that was because he already had the Michaela plan. I don't think so, because that came after her whole shell and rock thing. I felt kind of safe, but you never really know.
Yeah, so I guess percentage, how confident were you that you were trusting Jay and Will that they were going to go with this Michaela boot and it wasn't just like a diversion? Brett says he was like 100%, but was in the back of your head saying this is Survivor, they might just, vote out me or vote out Brett?
I was pretty confident. I don't know that I ever would say 100%, but I'm going to go 95. But this is why I was, even if it didn't go Michaela, Hannah, and Will had all come to me separately that day and said, I cannot write your name down.
So why do you think that is? Why did they go for Brett over you?
I think because of that whole dumb conversation that Hannah had when she thought she had him as a cop. I mean, he was, but when you're choosing between Brett and I, and all of us are close, it takes the tiniest little reason to differentiate between the two of us. There's, they liked both of us. They love Brett. They love me. And that's all I can think of, that little tiny thing. I mean, I had put in, like I said, Brett put in time too, but I don't know if I maybe had a better connection with the two girls than Brett possibly did. Will was the same age as my son. And I think, Jay's 26, but I would always tease him and say, you're a teenager. And he'd be like, I'm not a teenager, I'm 26. I'm like, you are a teenager. So I don't know if it was like the mom thing. And I can't say, I'm not saying they weren't gunning for Brett by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying, that's what they told me. And because they liked both of us, it only took one tiny thing. That's the only thing I could have thought of. But all I can say is I'm sure glad it wasn't Brett, because I was crying on and off all day because I was so scared either him or myself was going to go.
Mm-hmm. And you think if Brett goes there, you going into the merge, are you just a sitting duck, do you feel like? Or do you feel like you still could have found a way in?
I feel like I could have possibly found a way in, because I feel like, had I had to have wrote Brett's name down, which of course neither of us wanted, I would have went in with Will, Jay, Michaela, and Hannah. Of course, Jay's going to get back with Taylor and Michelle. But when I first got back after the merge, Jessica and I talked and we kind of tried to smooth things over. I feel like I could have possibly rebuilt something with Jessica and coming to her with like information, say on Jay. But I was tight with Jay then. So I feel like Jay would have wanted to keep me around in his mind for a number. And I would have stuck around to, grow numbers on my side.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So then you do hit the merge, and like you just said, you did smooth things over with Jessica, but it seemed like you tried. You were a little bit. Yeah, okay, so a little bit. Because it seemed like you guys never really did, even though you voted together on that first vote. And you did go against the smaller group that you had said you were tight with. was it just because they didn't talk to you? Like, did you just feel more comfortable with Jessica and Chris? And then, because it seemed like you were never really comfortable on either side.
Well, when we got to the merge, we were going in strong, supposedly, right? And I always felt like I was tight with Jay and Will, even though the minute we got there, Jay was spending all of his time with Taylor. I was still on the side talking to him all day. Jay, we're still good, right? Yep, we're still, having all these conversations throughout the day. Jessica and I talked, and, again, probably my fault. We tried to connect and it just didn't gel all the way back. So we voted all on that same first vote together. But I felt like getting to the merge, I 100% had Chris. I 100% had Brett. Immediately we're connecting with Chris. Who do you have? Chris is like, well, I've got Zeke. Okay, you got Zeke. We got Jill. We got Jay and Will, as far as we know. And I was much more trusting of Jay than Brett was. Brett was always like, he's with Taylor too much. He's with Taylor too much, But, I definitely felt like I had my group, my numbers. And then, Jess and them voted with us on that first vote. And then from there, it was like, okay, let's see, we're going to vote again together, the next time. And then it was the Taylor vote. And then it all went downhill from there.
Yeah.
So you had Jay on the other side there. Were you kind of giving him information about where the vote was going? Because he held on to that idol for so long, and we were kind of wondering, maybe who's he getting that from? And then we hear that you and Jay were pretty close. Was it you telling him?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't say that to take away credit from Jay and his, how good he was at when to play the idol and when not to. But I was giving him information. And he still had to decide if he was going to go, believe it or not. But I felt like it was in my best interest to keep as tight as I could with Jay, even if it looked like he was, over there with Taylor. I just still felt like he was going to be loyal to me. And I still had Chris and Brett, and by extension of that, Zeke, at least until the Chris vote.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so that's interesting. So so you hadn't lied. Well, you didn't really lie, but you had that move where you told Adam it was going to be Ken. So Jay hadn't seen that yet. But so Jay was really taking it from you. He felt close enough that when you said we're voting Taylor, he was like, all right, cool, you guys are voting Taylor. He felt comfortable enough like that.
Yeah, and the thing was, we had a conversation. So me, Jay, Taylor were on the hammock talking before the vote, okay? And Taylor's trying to pitch this plan to me and Jay, but mostly me. Hey, the three of us could really go. We could take Will with us. If you switch right now, me, if I flop right now, then you can go with us. And I'm like, you're insane. And Will is standing behind him, and he's listening to the plan. And I'm giving Will the no eyes without shaking my head. Like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. And so that I think is when I was in the hammock, maybe when I can't remember if that was the time, but I told Jay, they're going to go for Taylor. And
well, I was just going to say, what was the reason to go for Michelle before Taylor? With Taylor being so, you knew he was in Jay's pocket, and he's also a challenge threat and everything. And I'm sure you'd heard from Adam and Jessica and Ken how he was. Why did Michelle go before Taylor then?
Well, at that point, okay, I have to back up. For that vote, I didn't know he had the idol yet. I thought that he did, but I didn't think that I wasn't sure. So they were going to split the votes, Jay and Taylor. And I think I told Jay that. Mm-hmm. Well, then it was like, well, if Jay has an idol and he plays it, Taylor goes, but we weren't sure. So Michelle was like a safe vote because no one was expecting Michelle. And she's so good at puzzles. No one wanted her to be able to do puzzles. So I think at that time it was like, no one will suspect us going for Michelle. And that's what happened.
So this is funny because you're the second. Will just mentioned how good Michelle was at puzzles. How good was she, and where did she prove this? Because
I don't remember. I think there was a challenge, the first one, maybe, right, where she did one with Figgy.
Yeah, when was she proving how great she was?
Okay, so that first one with Figgy, but then the blindfold challenge, she came from the very bottom and came back and won the whole thing. I mean, they were way behind. And so it was those two puzzles. And then she was one of the ones when they unscrambled the letters on the chair one. And she also was working on the one where we knocked over the blocks and then had to put them back up. I feel like she was on that one too. But everyone's just like, Michelle is insane at puzzles. But more importantly, it was to break up that like
the Triforce.
Dumb Triforce thing. And we just, they'll never suspect we're going for Michelle, and they didn't.
Yeah, so do you think that Jay at that point knew, did you ever tell him about the Michelle vote, or was he kind of taking a risk there not playing his idol?
No, we didn't tell him about Michelle, and it was kind of a test. And then that was one of those things where after I had to go back and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you, one of those. And that's why later, I don't know if they ever showed it, but Jay was like, could I ever be on vote right one time? Like, he never voted right, like ever. And it's because we were never telling him the right name when we went to tribal. So I had to go back and do my damage control again. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't tell you. You understand?
And so was that around the time that this master plan, because we have to know what this was. Is this around the time that this came into effect?
Not yet. I had to get a little bit further down the line before my master.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's go to the Rock Draw Tribal Council, because, I mean, we've gotten a lot of different perspectives on this, and supposedly it was much crazier than we were shown. Will was about to empty his bag. People were bickering and things like this. So let's hear the Sunday perspective of the Rock Draw.
Okay, well, we knew it could go to rocks. I mean, this was well talked about before we ever got there. And as tribal starts out, Will is like, what do you call that? Like when you're puffing your chest as a guy?
I'm not sure.
Or something like that. Okay, so he gets like all indignant, and he's like, they're talking about idols, and someone says David has an idol, and then Will's like, yeah, well, we should just all dump out our bags. I'll dump out my bag right now and prove I don't have an idol. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the crap are you saying? I am not dumping out my bag, because I had family letters in my bag because we won them on a reward and we didn't tell anybody. And I'm panicking, like, I don't care what the crap you say, I'm not dumping out my bag. And then him and David are going back and forth. You dump out your bag. You dump out your bag. And it was just insane. So I don't know how that all got fixed. But then we get to the votes. And first vote, then, of course, we know there's going to be a tie. And then we're doing all the talking before the second vote. And I'm sitting there, and I hear David say my name to Adam. And so I turn around, and I look at David, and I was like, did you just say to vote for me? And David's like, no. And I go, yes, you did, David. I heard you. And he goes, okay, I did. And I said, well, that's stupid, David. And he's like, yeah, you're right, And so then we're just all talking, and Jeff's trying to ask us questions, but, we're not paying attention because we're talking to each other. And then Hannah, okay, I got to back up. After Ikabula, Hannah and I still had a working relationship, okay? So every day we would check in with each other about what the votes were going to be. And she would always come, Mama Sunday, what do you think? Well, this is what I think. Okay, this is what's happening. This is going on every day. Well, probably the day before the Rock Draw day, she didn't check in with me. And I knew something was starting to shift. Well, that's because she had decided to turn on Zeke. And Zeke was in our alliance. So now we're at the Rock Draw. She's looking at me. Me and Will are talking to each other, and we're like, just stick to the plan. And so she flat out I'm next to her. She's looking me in the face. She's like, what's the plan? And I'm just staring at her like, you've got to be freaking kidding me right now. And she's looking at me, like I'm going to tell her, like I'm stupid. And so I looked down, I kind of leaned back on my stump, and I looked down, I'm thinking, who is not getting any votes? Because we're pretty sure David's going to play an idol. So I'm like, Ken, we're voting Ken. And then she whispers to Adam, and then, so even before that, though, I have to say this. Before I told them about Ken, Adam leans up to me and he goes, if you switch your vote, I'll give you my reward advantage. And because this was on the second vote, and that made me mad. Like, I'm not dumb. Like, first of all, it's not an advantage. And second of all, like, I'm going to flip on everybody for a reward anyways. So both of those two really pissed me off because I thought I was so dumb or something. So then I say Ken. And then when Adam stopped David and said Ken, I thought I was going to die. I couldn't believe it. So I'm just like total poker face. Like, don't smile, don't laugh, don't chuckle. I'm just like,
Why do you think they believed it?
I honestly have no. Okay, this is all I can think. I'm not a big liar. Like, that's not my MO for the game, right? I mean, I lied, but it's not my MO for the game. So I think because I had good relationships, I had a really good relationship with Hannah, and I had kind of a. My relationship with Hannah was kind of like that mom. Like, I tried to protect her a lot. And like I would, hold her hand, like, so she'd say, will you hold my hand so I won't itch my bug bites? And, when she's having a hard time and that kind of a thing. So whose mom lies to them? Like, nobody's mom lies to them, like, normally, right? And Adam, I just don't think he thought I had it in me. Not in a negative way, but I don't think he would have thought, oh, she came up with that on her own. Like, I don't think they saw that side of me to expect that from me. So because it was unexpected and it happened kind of fast, I think that's why they believed it.
Yeah, because I would think you're sitting there in that position and you're Adam or Hannah, and they know that you're on the other side for this vote.
Right.
If you hear Ken, you say, okay, they're voting for Hannah. Like,
exactly.
Like, it's crazy. I don't understand why they would think that you'd actually say the right person.
Yeah. And didn't David play it for himself, and then he had to switch it to Ken? And I mean, he would have been wrong either way. But how long did that take for that whole process to kind of fizzle out until he finally played it for Ken? Oh,
I mean, probably seconds, because it's not like you can play it and then change your mind. I mean, he did a little, but I mean, it wasn't long. I mean, he played it. And then by the time he's getting back to his seat, Adam's stopping him and he's saying, okay, Ken. And I'm just like trying to I'm not looking their way. I'm not going to smile. I'm not going to laugh. Because it is true that tribal council is smoke and mirrors. It's acting every night because you cannot give the plan away. So every night Jeff is wanting information. You have to figure out how to give him information without giving away any information from your alliance. And it is like acting every night. It's actually very hard to do. It's very nerve-wracking. So
what does Jeff do if he doesn't think you're giving him the truth? Like, what will he just keep repeating the question? Will he yell at you? What are some of his tactics?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, he'll either say, that's not an answer. Do you want to try again? Or he'll get upset, or then he'll skip you. And then he won't ask you any more questions. So at the beginning of the game during the tribals, Brett stunk. He wasn't giving good answers. But it was so weird because he wasn't being himself. So as soon as he started just being himself and really giving up information, the first time he did that, we all clapped for him at tribal. Because he just, I don't know if he wigged himself out or what, but he is so funny and he's witty too. And so when he finally started kind of getting on a roll, then you got to see, the real tribals with Brett.
I'm sure those were fun.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You took the shot at Brett. He's listening, but he hasn't been giving you as much flack as we thought he was going to. But so do you think that he going into that tribal where it was 5-5, and we heard Brett's take, but where you were sitting, you're right in front of Brett, and when he's having that argument with Ken and saying welcome to the game and all this, was that a plan for anybody to have Brett come in kind of aggressive, or was it just that whole situation was just a mess?
No, it was so incredibly frustrating. And here's why. David is David, okay, at camp. He's, scared of things. He's not super aggressive, okay? David at tribal council is a different person. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So all of a sudden, David goes from being, David, and he comes in, he's like, Mr. Big Man, and it's frustrating because it's who are you? And all of a sudden, he's being really aggressive, and what happened was David goes, I think everybody in Zeke's alliance should raise their hands. What? And it was just, and that really ticked Brett off. And it was annoying. He was, he was peacock. He was trying to be the big man. And so that's why Brett was so frustrated, because it was like, why don't all you guys raise your hands then, And that's when, things got a tiny bit out of hand, and I had to give him the old stop talking, which is kind of what we did the whole game. I spent most of the game either fixing his hair or saying, stop talking. Yeah.
I'm sure. Why didn't we get more clips of you fixing his hair? Now that's a real question.
I know, right? Well, that makes good TV, but I don't know. His hair looked good all the time, though. Literally, he 5 times a day. Sunday, how's my hair? Sunday, how's my hair?
That's funny. So then after this vote happens, the rock happens, Jessica goes home. You're at final 9 in the majority alliance of 5. You're pretty sure that Jay has an idol. How confident are you feeling, and what in the world happened?
Okay, we are feeling so great because obviously there's 5 of us, right? And I have, not only that, but I have a good relationship with David. Now, I'm not saying David would have saved me, but David and I talked a lot. And David and I had an agreement with each other that we would at least get each other to the family visit. That he wouldn't let me get voted off, and I wouldn't let him get voted off. Plus, I had my tight relationship with Jay. I felt like I was tight with Will, not as tight as Jay, but I felt like I was good with Will. I had a good relationship with Adam, even though he wasn't in my alliance. And it was like the next day was the family visit. And I remember my husband coming, and I'm finally get a couple minutes alone with him. And I'm like, I know I'm good for the next 2 votes. I'm 100 good for the next 2 votes. And he's like, well, how do you know that? And I'm explaining all the alliance. And he's saying stuff we're at like a picnic thing. And I'm like, honey, stop talking. Adam is not in our alliance. You need to stop talking now. But I'm like, I am solid for 2 votes. And then Will.
Well, it's funny. You did make it 2 votes. You were right. But what did Will do? Like, what was Will thinking?
Will wanted to make a big move. And that's fine unless you tell everyone you're making a big move. Right? I mean, he played amazing. I mean, I was so impressed with how good he played, especially at 18. But take away the 18 part, he was playing a good game. And I think the problem was that he wanted this big move, but he told everybody. Like, you don't tell everybody, I'm making a big move for my resume. I'm making a big move for my resume. It just doesn't work. And so then he had the whole blow up with Ken and we went to that tribal that night, and I was confident he was voting with us. And then he started, everyone treats me like I'm 18, and I said what I said, which came out totally wrong. I wasn't trying to put him down, but I was like, even later I go, Will, why were you saying all that? He goes, well, that was just for the camera. He goes, I was just acting it up. And I was like, but I've never treated you like that, whatever. So, Zeke went home, and now we're in trouble again. Or we're 4-4, right? Is that where we're at?
Yep.
And we go back, and Brett and I are on the beach talking, and this is Will to Brett and I. Guys, it was no big deal. I mean, I just needed to make a move for my resume. Like, it's fine. Fine? What are you even talking about right now? You just screwed up both of our games, and he wanted us to be like, good job. You made a big move and be okay with it. And, in hindsight, I probably should have been okay with it. But the next morning I woke up and I was so furious. And I'm like, why is he talking to us like we're children? Nobody talks to me like that. I'm just so mad. And so me and Brett, we would always count heads. We watch the sunrise with David every morning. Count heads. Where is everybody? Who's missing? Adam's missing. That means Adam's looking for an idol. And Brett and I take off to find Adam, find him at the well, pitch to him that we want to vote out Will. And, maybe in hindsight, we should have tried to just sucked it up and tried to see if we could have kept Will with us and reined him back in. But how do you trust how do you trust that again as an alliance member that far into the game?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, and it's funny because you guys were the next 5 to go. What if Will votes out Hannah? And granted, Adam did play his idol, but you might have still trusted Will a little bit more had he actually voted with all of you. What was your scenario there for your final? Who did you want the final 3 to be?
Well, yeah, this is where the master plan comes in, right? We're getting pretty close, I
We
think.
have to be getting there.
I hope
Will knew
so.
about it.
I wanted Will to go. Here's the thing. Jay had kept telling me that he wanted to sit at the end with me. Okay. Now, if you're a smart person, you realize Jay wants to sit at the end with you because he thinks he can beat you, right? Jay is saying to me, no, I want to sit with you because I want to sit with good competition. Okay, Jay. I love you, but I know that's not true. So Jay has an idol, and Jay is telling me I'm going to save my idol and use it for you at 5. Okay. I believe him. And why? Because it makes sense for him to save the idol and use it for me if he thinks he can take me to the end because he can beat me, right? So it makes sense. It's not outlandish for me to believe that Jay was telling the truth when he is telling me he's going to use his idol for me at 5. So I'm thinking that he uses it for me at 5, then I vote him out at 4, which he wouldn't have expected. But I think because Jay respects the game, he would have respected me for making the move. I think it's a gamble, but that's what I thought. So I thought if he keeps me in at 5, I vote him out at 4. Then I've got me, Brett, and either Ken or Hannah at the end.
Okay.
And to me, I can, I felt like I could have won against a Hannah or Ken. And Brett, I just felt like, I don't know. It would have been I think it would have been really close on numbers. And I think it would have been who probably gave the best speech in the end. And I public speak for a living. So I felt like I could be very composed and build my case and really be able to sell my story and why I felt like I should have won at the end.
So you wanted your next 3 to pretty much be Will, after the Zeke vote, you wanted Will, Adam, and either Ken or Hannah gone.
Well, yeah, but Dave would have had to been gone in there too.
Oh, Dave, that's right.
Adam here's the funny thing about Adam. Adam would work with you one vote and not the next one and then work with you again. So he would be like, okay, so at the rock drop, for instance, he's like, I'm not going to vote with you this time, but I'll vote with you next time. Okay, I would be like, Adam, that's not loyalty. You can't tell me you're not going to vote this time, but you will next time. So then next time, he's like, okay, I'll vote with you guys. And was that for, what vote was that?
That was for Will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then he promised me and Brett for like 2 votes that he vote out David. So the night I went home, he had promised me he would vote for David that night. And I think that he was going to until Hannah got those guys to flip it around. Like for David and Ken, whatever, they're just getting rid of a number. But I wished that Hannah wasn't able to convince them to go for me, obviously, that night.
So how shocked were you when it ended up being you, and what was that whole experience, that whole night? Like, did you have feelings throughout that it might be you?
No, I mean a little, because you kind of always have to think that way or you're in trouble. But I had spoken with Adam and Hannah like all day about the plan for that night. And I even had to have Adam text it to me one time because I was like, why did I vote for Jay? And I knew there was a reason, but I couldn't remember what it was. But we had played out the numbers and there could have been a tie. And if David had an idol and this and that, but David should have gone home that night. And so with me sitting there and my name coming up, I am like, who votes out me with Adam, Jay, and David and Brett still in the game? That makes no sense to me. And so I was in shock because it was like, crap, now my plan's out the window, and Jay ends up, I wish I just wouldn't have expected it because I could have talked to Jay ahead of time and be like, hey, I think you need to play it for me. But it just came out of, I had a plan with Adam and Hannah all day. We talked on a log on the beach. I can remember the exact spot 3 different times for 20 minutes at a time. And so yeah, I was pretty surprised. That really
and I don't even know if we asked Adam about this, but like I'm looking at it, it was what, 4-2-1, and you voted for Jay, so you would have voted for David had you not thought. I wonder why Adam didn't vote David that night.
Well, I think because of Hannah. I'm going to read you this because it's so confusing. I wrote it down because
I think he wanted to flush Jay's idol too, and he would have had to get Jay in on the plan if he wanted to, get.
But Jay voted for David anyway.
Yeah,
I think that was.
We thought we were all voting for David. I mean, me, Brett, and Jay at least. And then I was having to tell. Okay, so I had this choice. If I don't tell Jay to play his idol and they vote for him and he doesn't, he goes home, then I have no idol for 5. Or I don't, it's like either or. It's not a good scenario for me. Whether so okay, listen, this is so confusing. This is what me, Adam, and Hannah talked about. Okay, you ready?
Awesome.
4 votes Jay, 3 votes David. Okay, got it? So me, Chris, and Brett are the David votes. But we worried that Jay, Dave, and Ken would team up. And if they did, it would only been 2 votes Jay, 2 votes Dave, and 3 of them could vote for whoever they wanted. So we had to put 1 more vote on Jay, so it would be 5 Jay, 2 Dave, and even if the 3 of them voted together, the majority of the votes would still be on Jay. Did you catch that?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, that's what it was. They wanted. I mean, Adam really wanted to flush Jay's idol that night, and then Hannah flipped it around onto you Sunday. Unfortunately. Yeah,
that was not fun to watch either.
I'm sure that was. Yeah, sure that's not fun. Man.
No, nobody wants to be called an enticing goat.
Would you have beaten Hannah though?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would have. She had a great final speech. She did spectacular. She came out confident, but the problem was that there was just so much moving back and forth. And part of the social game is the ability to vote people out without them hating you for it at the finals, or, getting their jury vote even though you voted them out. So there's a way that you can vote people out, garnering their respect where they'll vote for you even though you voted them out. Or there's a way that you can do it where you just leave so sour of a taste in someone's mouth that even though you may have made a good move, you didn't win in the social part of the game.
Yeah, so you get to Ponderosa, and are you just like, guys, Hannah just did this and it was dumb? Like what? Like, is that kind of what was happening?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a minute to figure it out. I mean, obviously I knew it wasn't Brett or Jay. So I at that point, when I first got to Ponderosa, I didn't know how the plan switched. I didn't know that obviously that Hannah initiated it and got them to turn it around. I was just like, I just didn't get it. Now, at that point, there's been discussion with Will and I, there had been discussion with Adam, Brett, and I, that we all felt like we all had a good chance going into the end. And, because I didn't get a lot of screen time, it was easier to support the idea in people's minds that maybe I was a goat or I wasn't doing anything to earn credit for the game. But from the people you've even talked to and who I played with, I was. And so I'm not saying anyone was like, don't let Sunday get to the end, because we're talking, we still have David and Jay in the game. But I felt like I was a contender. And part of that was my social game and the likability that I had. I had a good story, although that wasn't part of my, that wouldn't have been part of my final tribal speech, because I would never want to win with the idea that I only got the win because of a sympathy, thing. So everybody's still there. We're contenders. And, I didn't want to sit by Will, because I felt like anyone sitting by Will, I felt like what a huge accomplishment to get to the end of the game at 18 and beat all of us. I didn't want to be sitting next to him for that reason. So I was kind of sad when I was listening to you guys with him the other night, and he said people told him that they wouldn't give him the money just because he was 18. That, I never felt that way. I felt like had he got to the end, I didn't want to be sitting next to him because it would have been a really big accomplishment.
Yeah. And
that surprised me too. If anything, it should that should boost him a little bit. Like, wow, he's only 18 and accomplishing that.
Yeah, and that was a conversation that Brett and I had, several times. Even Jay, I don't want to sit next to Will. He's this 18-year-old. He gets to the end. He's a shoo-in. So I felt bad that people had said that to him. I don't agree at all.
Oh, that's good. And another thing I want to bring up here, and we haven't asked anybody else this, but you just said you wouldn't want to win because of a sympathy thing. That Adam thing at the end, that had nothing to do with how many votes he got.
Zero.
Thank you.
No, we didn't. Most of us, I can't say for everyone, but I'm going to say I pretty much understand people's votes were made up before we ever got to Final Tribal, which I think is pretty common. We didn't find out, we heard it when you guys heard it at Final Tribal Council about his mom. And by then, I felt like almost everybody's votes were completely solid. It had nothing to do with it whatsoever. And in fact, that even proves even more how good of a player he was, that he was able to navigate that game with all of this going on, all this emotional stuff, worrying about his mom, and still keep his head in the game and recover from the mistakes that he recovered from. I mean, it even more proves what a good player he was. But absolutely nothing to do with, with his mom. It's infuriating to me when people say that. And I've gotten on several arguments on Twitter and Facebook, and I just want to rip my hair out. It's like, we were there. Like, I don't understand.
You voted.
Yeah, I don't understand how people say the jury got it wrong. We saw it all. We experienced it all. We had all the conversations,
Internet trolls. They can't help themselves. They love it.
I know.
But so you, it's funny though, you said your mind was made up when you got in there. So you go into this Final Tribal. I'm assuming Final Tribal is a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
What are you guys really doing and thinking while you're there, considering you've all probably already discussed who you're going to vote for and who you're not going to vote for? What is the point of that Final Tribal at that point?
Well, supposedly you're supposed to go there with an open mind, which maybe some people do. And the point of it is obviously, you're supposed to be asking questions that help you determine the winner. Now, I don't think, how many seasons have been unanimous? Not that many, right?
Yeah, a handful.
I think like 5.
So a lot of times I think people do actually change their mind based on the questions that they asked. I guess I haven't asked a bunch of jury members this, but you're supposed to be finding out things that would help you make your answer, and they have to have a Final Tribal. So I can't imagine they come in and go, well, you guys probably already know, so we're just going to skip Final Tribal this year.
It's just, I just find it interesting. Like, here's Hannah, and you even said she gave a great Final Tribal speech, but you played the game with her, so you already knew what she'd done, and really whatever she's going to say, unless she has some huge reveal, isn't going to change your mind at all.
No, but, sometimes people can, how where they say you can't see the forest from the trees. So when you're with people and playing the game all the time, sometimes you need someone. It's like Final Tribal. You need that summary. You need the people in the Final Tribal need to be able to summarize their story. And they need to point out to all of you who maybe weren't with them at, maybe the people that were at Gen X that didn't see what Hannah did at Vanua, or maybe you weren't there for all of it. So that those people in the Final Tribal have to summarize their game in such a way that everyone sitting there understands why they did what they did and how they got to the end. And if you can't verbalize it in a way that solidifies what people are already thinking, you're not going to be able to change votes. And I think, for me, it just, as the game progressed, Hannah got, I love her, but she just got more and more condescending as the game went on. and a little bit like I'm running the show. And, like the day that I went out, I'm depending on her to vote the way that we talked about voting all day, right? For my game. So before we leave that afternoon, she's standing by the fire and she's going, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do tonight. I can't decide. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And she's playing with 5 people's games. You know what I'm saying? So that like totally ticked me off. And I addressed her on it at Final Tribal, which you didn't see. But it was that kind of attitude, like, I'm in charge. So, oh, well, for you, I'm just going to decide. And that just doesn't sit well with people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a side we didn't really get to see of Hannah. And that's why I think so many people were surprised Hannah didn't get a single vote at the Final Tribal. So, yeah, that's pretty much the game, right, from beginning to end. Do you want to do comments here? Because we have a bunch. And
sure.
Oh, yeah.
I know people are
Only the
interested.
nice ones, though.
Only the nice ones. Okay, so I won't.
I'm sure they're all lovely.
Let me see here. All right, we'll start. This is a fun one. I don't know if you're allowed to answer this, but I guess we'll do it as a can you answer this? Gamer Girl says, can you confirm that security showed up at Michaela's tribal council?
No security.
No security. So Brett got excited. He said that, and he said security showed up, and then he kind of kept talking, and everybody's just been like, wait.
No, that's Brett being excited.
Yeah, I did a double take there too. We never really pushed him on it. So that's a good question.
No, that's a good question. No.
Okay, and then let's see here. Oh, here we go. So she says, Sunday, did you get to share the gospel to anyone or lead anyone to the Lord? I'm Christian too.
No. And I went out there, my number one goal out there, I'll tell you what it was. It was to not be a weird Christian.
Well, I think you succeeded.
Thank you. Because unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the Christians that have been on the show have been weird. I don't know if I'm not offending anybody, but I just that wasn't the purpose of me going. I went there to play a game, to be myself, and to be an example the best that I could of God's love. And that's what I tried to do.
And I think it's interesting because in the pre-show stuff, it seemed like you had a very religious group going out there. And a lot of people were worried we were going to get something similar to like South Pacific, where religion played such a role. And really, it didn't play a role at all.
No. And I just chuckled at myself reading all that stuff before the game started. She's going to be crazy Christian. She's going to freak out. She's going to be yelling and praying all the time, and I just there are people like us that are normal. And that's just what I wanted to be, was normal.
Yeah, that's funny. So let's see here. Carter Mortensen, what is the move you wanted to do if you stayed in PS? Minnesota today is average for this time of the year. Uh-oh.
Okay. Yeah, it is average, I guess. What was the move I didn't get to make? Is that what he said?
Yeah, what was the move you wanted to do if you had stayed?
Well, if I had stayed, well, I wanted to get out David, and I wanted to be there long enough for Jay to let me use his idol at 5 and then vote him out at 4.
Okay.
That's if he didn't win immunity. That's
Okay.
always a gamble,
Did he tell you that he'd give you the idol at 5 only if you won immunity, or 100%?
No, he just said he would save it for me at 5. So I believed him because, like I said, if you're Jay, why wouldn't you want to take me? And he wouldn't have expected me to vote him out. But I do think it was a gamble, but I feel like he would have respected me for making the move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see here. Giovanni Oriana asks, did you ever think that you would end up like a Dawn or a Lisa and not get enough votes to win?
No, I feel like it depends who you're sitting with. If I'm sitting with David and Adam, I'm not going to get the votes to win. If I'm sitting with David and Jay, I'm not going to get the votes to win. But if I'm sitting with Hannah and Ken, I think I get the votes to win. And unless I'm with David and Jay, or David or Jay, some combination of David and Jay, I feel like I could have gotten, a couple of votes. I don't see me as a no vote scenario.
Okay. Let's see here.
I didn't take enough people off for that, you know. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's Larry Miller wants to know, why couldn't you, Jessica, Cece, and Lucy form a moms alliance, as how moms aren't popular in the end?
Well, I mean, that was way at the beginning of Gen X. So to think that all four of us would have stuck together till the end is near impossible. But out of the gate, you know, unfortunately, at the beginning of the game, Cece had aligned herself with Rachel. And it was just really hard for her to recover from that. And again, that didn't go in my strategy of how I wanted to play the game. I wanted the two alpha males, and I connected with those guys better anyways. So, you know, I mean, obviously I connected with all the girls at the beginning, but it just wasn't going to work for all four girl alliance like that. And we wouldn't have got the end together anyway.
And what was it with Cece? Because we've gotten such, like, we've heard, we got so little of Cece, and before the season started, we were very high on Cece. What, did she just have a very hard time fitting in?
High on Cece, low on me.
No, we were very low on you. We really were. We kept saying that the type of player like you, and I think it has to do with, like you said before, you come in with the Christianity,
Yeah.
and you have the mom figure.
Yeah.
And we've seen people make it to the end. Dawn, Sherry wasn't so religious, but she did make it to the end. And then you had Lisa Welchel, and none of them got any votes.
No.
And from what we're hearing is, if you made it to the end, Brett would have voted for you. Chris probably would have voted for you. You would have gotten votes out.
Yeah, you proved us wrong. So
You really did.
Thank you. Now, do you mean mom figure, like figure character? Her
Yeah.
figure?
No, I mean character. Yes, yes. The mother figure on the island, not like the mother figure. Yes.
I'm kidding. Okay, Cece. Yeah. What? Oh, I don't know what it was about. I mean, I think it hurt her to align with Rachel right away, and she's super nice lady. I mean, we're friends. You know, I don't know.
Were you surprised that she went when they had them? That was like the only tribe that actually had the majority of Gen X. Were you surprised she went, or did you think Chris and David would get rid of her?
I kind of thought that they would.
Okay.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Because David and Chris hadn't really been seeing eye to eye the whole time, but you were kind of feeling that anyway.
Yeah, because I mean, CC had votes at like every tribal. A lot of tribals, I should say, leading up to that. So no, I guess I wasn't surprised. Mm-mm.
So let's see here. Harold Rice, I have to refresh this page. This is a very important question while I refresh, but do you have a kid named Monday or Friday?
Very funny.
Yeah. How often do you get these Sunday days of the week jokes?
All the time. I wouldn't torture my kids the way that my parents did me.
We didn't make the Sunday on Sunday joke, you know.
Now we did. You just
I
did.
was very impressed.
Yeah, we didn't. Brett really wanted us to play Sunday.
Brett made enough for everybody. It's okay.
He really wanted us to play Sunday Bloody Sunday. It was.
I know. Sings it to me all the time.
I'm sure it doesn't get old.
No.
Kim asks, who did you wish you had a better relationship with out there?
Jessica.
And
Jessica. I should have mended that fence way earlier than I did and just not because we did hit it off really well right away. And, you know, it's a mistake in Survivor to leave relationships fester. And after her vote, unfortunately, we went to the swap. And so we really didn't have any time to mend the relationship. And then coming into the merge, I was just too skittish to believe that we could actually work together. So I wished I would have, I wish I would have mended that quicker. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then it even looked like at Ponderosa, you still had not mended it. And you did, though, towards the end, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's all good now. That's good to see.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah.
Survivor CBS fan says, due to your airtime being so minimal, would you ever play again? And if so, what would you do differently?
Well, I for sure would play again if they'd ever let me. What I would do differently is I wouldn't overcorrect in the, trying to take a leadership role. I would voice my opinions louder and make sure that people knew that I was part of the vote. And I would have made sure that I had a couple votes or a couple moves that I orchestrated sooner in the game that I got credit for.
And that's funny because like on your Gen X tribe, it was you guys had 4 of the first 5 votes, right? It was 4 of you went home before the swap, or 3 of you went home before the swap. I forget which it was. But did you just feel like you weren't getting credit for the Paul thing, and then the Lucy was very weird, where nobody really gets credit for that except for David, I guess. But
Right. That was a total blindside. And the thing is, like, I've heard people say, like, Brett and Sunday were just Chris's pawns. Okay, that was not true at all. We were in an alliance together. We talked and made decisions together. It's not like Brett and I were like, okay, Chris, what should we do today? It's like when you're in an alliance, you're not a good alliance member unless you're communicating and making decisions together. So, the very beginning of the game before the Paul vote, there was a few things that Jessica said that made me wonder if I could trust her. And they were probably misunderstandings on my end. And I've told her this. But a few things that she said made me wonder and made me think that if I continue in the game with her, she is going to say that she made all the moves and I didn't. And I was not going to put myself in the position, or I tried not to, where someone else was going to be able to say, I made the decisions and pulled her along. And so that partly went into, agreeing to vote with the vote to vote her out.
Now, with Chris and Brett, was there any way that you would have sat at the final 3 with Chris as, like, both of them?
No. In fact, the day that Chris was blindsided, Brett and I were in the hammock, and I looked at him and I go, you know what we're going to have to do, don't you? And he's like, don't say it. And I'm like, but you know what we have to do. And he's like, yeah, but don't say it. And, I'm telling him we're going to have to vote Chris out at some point. I would have never sat at the end with the both of them, and I wouldn't have wanted to sit there with Chris.
And what was Chris like? Because we haven't really talked much about Chris. Brett was, his game, and he talked a lot about you. But what was Chris like? Because he was another one. He was seen, but we didn't really get his perspective on a lot of what was going on. Was he really, like, very, very likable to the extent they had to blindside him early, or what was up with Chris?
Well, he was likable, but I don't think that's the first way you're going to describe Chris. I don't think you're going to say, well, we had to get rid of Chris because he was so likable. Chris had to be gotten rid of because he was very smart, and he was, like all of us, thinking 3 steps ahead strategy-wise, and you never knew when he could have just kept winning challenges. Now, the challenges, some of them were really hard for the bigger guys because they're like little tiny balance beams, and those things really proved to be really hard for Chris. But potentially you could see Chris as a person that could have won a lot of immunities, and he's a powerful, strong, personality. And so you could think people would maybe follow him or just let him dictate to them. And so for all those reasons, there's no way anyone was ever going to let Chris get close to the end.
Okay.
Including Brett and I. I mean, I love him, but I'm not going to sit by him. That's for sure.
And what about Brett here? You're saying you knew you're gonna have to vote out Chris eventually. Was it in the back of your head that, hey, Brett's pretty likable too, I'm gonna have to cut his head off at some point?
I definitely thought about it, but I really don't think I ever could have done it. I think I would have felt better about sitting in the end with him and letting the jury decide and being okay with how the vote shook out. I probably never could have wrote his name down ever.
Got it. Very cool.
I love him.
That's funny because we saw Ken do it to David, but you wouldn't have done it to Brett. So there you go. That's
no,
nice
but here's the thing. Ken told everybody the whole entire game how he kept his word and was going to have integrity and was going to keep his word and was going to keep his word and was going to keep his word. And that was the, that's how Ken set himself up as the person that was going to keep his word. I would have kept my promise to Brett, but I wasn't the entire game announcing to everybody. I mean, Ken wasn't announcing it, but I'm just saying that isn't what you would have thought of when it came to a vote between Brett and I. Oh, Sunday promised him and told us all this whole game that she would never vote him out. We promised each other like on day probably 2 or 3 that we would never write each other's name down unless it was for $1 million. And I tried the whole time to think, okay, is this just emotional? I don't want to get home and have my family be like, what are you doing? You just gave away $1 million. But I felt like we were so similar in how we played our game that I felt fine sitting next to him at the end and seeing where the chips fell.
Mm-hmm. So let's see here. We got Jack who says, Sunday, I think I'm your biggest fan. Did you tell any of your family where you placed?
No, my husband knew and my sister knew, but my kids did not know and nobody else knew. So I had a family only party, my boot episode, but it kind of worked out because I told everybody, well, it's the last one before the finale and next week I'll be in LA and it's the last time. And so that's how I kind of sloughed it off. One of my brothers texted me, he's like, you're getting voted off, aren't you? And I was like, no, it's the last party, you know? So that was tough for my kids and for everybody else. But I didn't want to steal the fun of the game by telling them what happened. And it was really hard because so many people were saying to me, and my kids thought I was at 4th. And people kept saying, I know you made it to final tribal. I know you at least made it to 4. And you just want to go, oh, I'm just going to let everybody down and find out I'm at 7th. You know,
well, why did word get out that you got 4th?
Huh?
Why did word get out that you were 4th?
No, my kids just thought that. Like they took everything I said and tried to piece it together. So they're like, okay, she lost this much weight. She talked about this person last. She talked about that person, and they made it to this point. And, you know, We've all been watching for a long time, so they're pretty smart.
That's funny. So your kids were pretty much playing Survivor at home with how far you got.
Yeah, totally, 100%. In fact, when I got my letters from home, my oldest wrote in the letter something like, this should be about day 15, Mom, or something. Whatever day he said it was, he was right.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Shocking.
That's
and
really
they had
funny.
all kinds of advice for me before I left. It was really funny.
That's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have Joe Brochacho. You were very close with Brett on the island. Did he ever open up to you about being gay like he did with Zeke?
No. Nope. I didn't find out until he told us at Ponderosa. And then I gave him so much crap because, you know, when he had that conversation with Zeke and we were at the picnic at the reward, what did I say to Zeke and Brett before I walked away? Don't say anything important while I'm gone. I come back and they act like they're just shooting the breeze. And then when I watch it on TV, I'm like, what? I mean, I knew he told us at Ponderosa, but I didn't know that they had that conversation right after I said, don't say anything important while I'm gone.
That's too funny.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Let's see here. We got. Well, oh yeah, here we go. This is these next 2 questions are both about challenges, and this one is something that we thought about that hasn't been mentioned in at all. But Caitlin Wiggle, something wants to know on the chair immunity challenge. Why did the Gen Xers pull Chris, the biggest guy?
Okay, I will tell you why. Because Chris was in charge of dictating the challenges, okay? Because if you have a bunch of people saying, I'll do this, you got to have one person. So we decide one person will designate, you do this, you do that, you do this, right? So Chris says, I'm going to go on the chair. And we're all looking at him like, are you freaking kidding me? And he is like, no, this is why. Because I can get through the obstacle thing fast because of football. And we're all thinking, okay. but there's not too much time, and who's going to argue with Chris, right? So we do him, or what? Oh God, that sounds terrible. We hold Chris in the chair, and later we're talking about it. I think this was even after the game. I think it was in LA actually. And we all went out to watch an episode together in like October in LA. So we're watching the episode, and Chris goes, "You know why I had you guys pull me in the chair?" And we're like, "Why?" And he goes, "Because I just wanted to ride it." I'm like, "You jerk."
Because I think one of the funniest pictures from this season is you, Jessica, Lucy, Cece, and Brett pulling Chris.
Him, all 500 pounds of him up on that chair.
Yeah, we talked about this. I think we're like, why did they choose Chris? We couldn't piece it together at all.
Yeah, it was Chris because he wanted to ride in the chair. Thank you, Chris. I don't think it would have mattered that they were never going to get that stupid puzzle thing.
All right, so then we're trying to just do one question from each person, just because there's so many questions, and these are like 2 hours long anyway. But this is again from Drobo Chacho, but this is something that I think a lot of people would want to know. How weird was that sandworm challenge?
Oh my God. It was so awful, you guys. It was awful. And do you know what? Before the challenge started, I said to Jeff, Jeff, you guys were sitting in a room one day and you said, what is the most embarrassing thing that we could make the castaways do? And then I think we're going to make it a challenge. I go, that's exactly what you guys did. And he goes, oh, I was like, no, you did. I know you did.
And who was it that was stuck?
Huh?
Somebody got stuck, right? Like somebody was stuck on the hill, and I forget who.
Jessica couldn't get up the hill, and that was, they shouldn't have made Jessica do that part. They should have given Jessica the first section like I had, the straight section, because, girls have shapes, and hills, that was difficult, okay? And so when I'm doing the challenge, like my knees and my knuckles were blood. And I'm trying to go. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting my face in the sand, like I'm going in water, like up and down, right? So I take a big breath, go in the sand, and I'm going. And all of a sudden I hear Jeff Probst, Will's leaving the American flag behind. And I thought I was going to die and inhale sand and choke to death. Oh my gosh, I was dying. But poor Will, and Brett totally lost his trunks. And that challenge was off. I mean, there was sand coming out of my nose, my ears for days. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not even exaggerating. It was awful.
It doesn't sound fun to do, but it was fun to watch. I can assure you that.
Very fun to watch.
You think they'll be doing it again?
I don't know. Do you think that worked as a challenge?
I think it did. I gotta say, it was. I mean, we're talking about it now, cracking up. I think that's what they want, right?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, even the very first, they shackle you all up, and you got to get on your knees to start the challenge. And okay, so pretend your arms and your legs are shackled, and you have to figure out how to get down on your knees.
You just plop.
Yeah, and then to start the challenge, you just got to basically dive into the sand head first, and it's hard as a rock. I mean, it was not fun, but I got my helicopter ride, so that's what I cared about.
And that that was your storyline for the season, was she wants her helicopter ride. What?
Yeah, I got some storyline at least. I was so bugged too because I saw someone on Twitter was like, if Sunday's biggest dream in life is to have a helicopter ride, she needs bigger dreams or something. And I'm like, are you stupid? I'm like, obviously, one thing on Survivor, I wanted the helicopter ride. And the thing is that everybody knew it, and they were all happy for me, which was really sweet that I got that. Zeke really wanted it too. So it was really cool we could share that together. But it was a huge dream of mine to have the helicopter ride on Survivor. And I got it. So I was happy. Brett and I went on all but one reward after the merge, and 3 of them with Brett.
Yeah, and Brett was drunk the whole time.
Well, I was drinking my pop. That's all I got to say.
That's funny.
He called me Soda Pop Sunday. It never made the air.
That's funny. That's funny.
That could have been a hashtag.
Yeah, I know, right? I also had another hashtag I was trying to do, and Josh Wigler had asked me to do this, and he's like, I want you to say Sunday school because it'll make a good hashtag. So I did it like 10 times, thinking surely it's got to make the cut, and it never made the cut. I was so annoyed.
Oh man, that would have been a good one. That is good.
Let's see here. Joe, you covered this post-merge, but maybe if you want to talk about something pre-merge. But Sunday, did you have any big moves planned that we didn't get to see?
Yeah. Well, most of them were post-merge plans. Are you saying post or pre-merge plans?
Well, I guess they're just asking if you had any planned, but we talked a lot about the post-merge, but I don't know if you had any other ones maybe that you hadn't said yet.
Pre-merge, they were really collaborative. I wished what I would have done is when we talked about the plan to vote out Paul, I wished what I had done is gone back to Paul, Chris, and Brett and told them that plan and voted out Jessica at that point. Only because it would have been, who knows? It seems like it would have been better for my game at the time because it would have kept us 5 and it still would have been 5-4 going forward. But hindsight's 20/20. And then you get to the swap and we only had a choice. We only went to tribal once at the swap.
Yeah, that went your way.
So yeah, and that went my way. So there weren't really that many more opportunities to make moves prior to that.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Survivor Lover, do they give you survival guides training before the game? Also, do they still have the outhouses?
Outhouses?
First time hearing.
Still?
I know, right?
I didn't know about outhouses. I mean, if you want to call the ocean if the ocean is code for outhouse, yes. Yeah, they give you, we have like a little survival guide we go through before the game starts so we know like what's poisonous and what's not and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But that's about it.
Jar Jar Minx asks,
I love that username, by the way.
It's great. And their @ is Mink Floyd. So it's great. They asked, did you and Michelle bond at Ponderosa over your similar lines of work? And was the election discussed at all on the island since you were filming in the midst of the primaries?
The election was not discussed a whole lot. I think most of us are pretty smart to keep that out of the game. And again, part of my gameplay was to keep my own beliefs to myself because I just don't think it's good for Survivor. It came up a little bit at the family visit. Like my husband, obviously got to come on the reward with me and everyone wanted to know what was going on. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was able to say that Bernie had dropped out. But the bigger news that we found out when he was there was that Prince had died, which is huge for us because I'm from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So that was really big news to find out. Michelle and I did bond at Ponderosa. She gave me a very nice pedicure and did my toes for me. And we talked a lot. And I love Michelle. She's a very sweet girl.
They played that trick on Will when he got there. Tried to play a trick on Will. Did they try to play a trick on you when you got to Ponderosa? Did it just not work? Did it work?
Oh, no, it worked. It worked hook, line, and sinker. So here's what they told me was Chris told me that he owned the 2 biggest strip clubs in Oklahoma City. And I was devastated. I mean, I was so upset and I'm looking at him like, no, and I'm trying like to not be judgmental or something, but I'm like, no, really? And he's like, yeah, what's the big deal? Girls got to make money. And I'm like, horrified, honestly horrified. And so what's funny is I was like devastated. So I go to my first like decompressing session with the doctor, and I sit down and I'm supposed to be there to like, talk about the game. The first thing I said is, Chris owns strip clubs. And she's like shaking and I'm like almost crying. And I'm not kidding you guys. I'm like tearing up. And she's going like, I'm like, I know, isn't it terrible? Like, no, he doesn't. And I'm like, what? I'm going to kill him. So yeah, that joke got played on everybody. It was pretty funny.
So did they also say that Michelle was a stripper, or was that just to, who was that? Was that just to Will?
That was to Brett. So when Brett came, first of all, the way the game worked is that someone else said what you did, and you didn't know what they were going to say about you, so you had to play along. So when Brett gets there, he says or I think it was Taylor's turn to say what I did. So Brett's there, and Taylor says to Brett, "You thought Sunday was a pastor? She's a professional poker player." And I'm like, and so Brett's like, "No, I knew it. I knew no one could be that good. I knew you weren't a pastor. Nobody's a goody two shoes like that." Crying. So they say that Michelle is a stripper, and he starts going on and on. "I knew you couldn't be crazy and believe in dragons. I knew you couldn't be crazy like that." And he's going on. No one stops him. He was so mad.
So you guys were all fooling a cop. You guys must have been pretty good.
Yeah. Well, when you get out of the game, you are so delusional. You can't even think.
I'm sure.
Brett thought that Jay found his Snapchat, and it was great. It was great.
Oh man!
How can you play poker professionally if you don't drink? And I'm like, I can't count cards if I'm drinking, And he's like, "Oh, you're right." And he's like, "I thought your husband worked with you." "Yeah, he's my agent." Oh, so funny.
Did Brett know what Snapchat was?
Yes, but he doesn't know how to use it.
Sorry, Brett. Let's see here. We have Ty asking, so you told Jay post-merge that you would not vote for him?
I don't know that I don't know that I said that to Jay.
Okay.
I have a question about Jay. If it's Jay and David in the finals, who are you voting for?
David.
David. Okay. Would Jay have been able to convince you at all if he said something at Tribal and kind of revealed anything, or would it have been David all the way?
Maybe. I mean, my heart would have wanted to vote for Jay. Just because I love him to pieces, but I feel like I would have, I really wanted to make my decision based on who I felt like played the best game and not emotionally and just like who I like the best. I really respect the game so much that I really wanted the person who truly outlasted and outplayed. So as much as my heart would have wanted to vote for Jay, I feel like I probably would have still went David.
And what do you think gave the edge to David over Jay? Because we did see Jay on the bottom, and he stayed around for a while. He held on to his idol a bunch of times. He played it at the wrong time. But we did see Jay make some moves. He made the big Michaela move. What do you think gave the edge to David, though, in the end? Because a lot of people have been saying David.
For me, I think it's because David was able to. Jay had to do a lot of the things that he did on his own. Like you saw him say, "I'm a lone wolf," la, 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 which bugged me because I was helping him the whole time. But David was able to get people to vote with him and be loyal to him. Like there's a skill in the fact that he got Hannah to be so loyal to him, Ken to be loyal to him, until the end. And he really, really was good at, we called him a puppeteer, at getting people to do what he wanted and getting them in the right spots at the right votes at the right time. I guess that's the only way I can describe. Plus, I saw David moving from, Gen X all the way on also.
And do you believe all of David? Because Brett doesn't.
I do actually.
Okay.
I do. I know Brett doesn't, but I do. That's the cop in him talking.
Yeah, he says it's he said he wrote a great character for the island.
I mean, I'm not going to deny he's a writer and he knows what he's doing, but I really think that what you saw is genuinely who David is. And I've seen it outside of the game. I didn't feel like he was much different outside of the game, and I've been with him, so.
Okay. Aaron Kahn asks, do you still not text you? The way you owned Probst was amazing.
Oh, that was nice. No, I don't. I thought that was just, when he was asking, I'm like, are you really asking this? And it's tribal council. Why are we even talking about texting at tribal council? And I just felt like sometimes Jeff, like, I think he just really, really loved the millennials and wanted any chance he could get to make the Gen Xers look like they were as old as possible.
And Jeff will never admit he's in that generation.
Yeah, he's a Gen Xer.
But he won't admit that, right?
Yeah, I think he's actually a baby boomer, actually. But
Really?
but I think I just think he wants to identify with the younger. I don't know, but I felt like any chance he got, he was saying how open to new ideas the millennials are and cutting edge, and the Gen Xers are just stuck in their ways and won't change. You know.
And I like that Mari was 31 and Ken was 33. I thought that was great. They're probably so different. You know what I mean? Like they were definitely not brought up in the same generation at all.
Right.
Ken
could have been like a 56 or 70-year-old stuck in a 33-year-old body.
Yeah. So do you feel like Jeff was pushing the theme like a lot, or was he?
At the time I didn't. I can see why people think that watching it back, but while I was playing the game, I guess I just thought it was part of the game, and I didn't feel that way at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, it never got too bad this season, at least as a viewer. I never was like, oh, it's getting a little ridiculous, because sometimes he really hits it over your head. But I thought it was pretty good this season. Everything really kind of fit together.
I thought so too. And there is a difference between Gen Xers and millennials and how they do things and how they think. I mean, I thought it was a good premise of the show. What you didn't see is that most of the time when Jeff asked me a question, he prefaced it like this. Sunday, as a mother. Sunday, as a mother. And everyone would we started making fun of it. And everyone would say to me, Sunday, as a mother, how do you, just like, yeah. I know you keep reminding everyone I was the oldest person out there after Paul left.
Wow. But you fit in. You feel like you fit in better with the millennials, or you felt fitting great with the millennials?
I feel like I fit in great with the millennials. I feel like I fit in great with a lot of different people. I'm friendly person. So, but I definitely wasn't nervous about getting with the millennials at all.
Mm-hmm. Brett, he does tweet and says, ask Sunday what she calls soft drinks. And then he answers his own question and says soda pop. And he has the crying emojis.
Yeah, soda pop Sunday.
Soda pop Sunday, exactly. Because I call it pop. We call it pop up here in the North Country. I don't talk that way, by the way. Brett has a worse accent than me, no matter what he says.
Yeah, Boston accents are very thick, so.
Yeah. Do you notice how he calls Hannah Hanner?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's I have family who lives in Philly who says the same thing, which I think it's funny that he was talking like my Philadelphia grandparents. Let's see. We have Riot the Pig. Sunday, who do you think you would have been able to beat, and who do you think you wouldn't be able to beat? You kind of talked about this, but if you want to solidify it.
I mean, I think I would have beaten Hannah and Ken. I wouldn't have beat David or Jay, or probably not Adam. I would have beat Hannah and Ken. Will, possibly. I feel like Will and I were really on kind of an even playing field. I feel like, I know he said he would have beat me, but I feel like
people said they may not vote for him, so just because he's 18. So
yeah, after I heard that, I feel like either Will or I could have made a great case, and I think it would have come down to who could have presented their argument better. And I think I'm really good at speeches, and I think I could have done okay in that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're pretty much done with Twitter comments. There's one, I'm looking at the chat as it goes by, and there was a new listener named Jen Lee who was asking about Ken's edit, because he got a hero edit early on, and then he gets to the end and doesn't get a single vote. What was your take on Ken? Because he was the enigma of this season, I feel like.
Okay, so Ken is a great guy. I just don't know that Ken came into the game 100% thinking strategy, and he focused a lot more on providing and building. I mean, I know he did strategize, and he strategized within his own like alliance, so I wasn't necessarily seeing it. But I felt like, you know, if you're doing things and no one knew that you did them, it's hard to get credit for them, you know? And there was times where, okay, so after, let's see, after, I think it was before the Will vote. So when we were going to vote for Will, I had gone to David and Ken, and my big idea to them was, hey, there's enough of us here. Let's pull Gen X back together. None of us want to see a millennial win this game. And I felt like I could get Ken over on that idea. And I tried to sell David on it. I'm like, listen, we could band back together and easily, let's just get to the end. Let's just get rid of the millennials. None of us want to see a millennial in the end, you know? And Ken was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And David went along with it, although I don't think he 100% bought it. But then for that vote, we got rid of Will. Okay. Then the next day, I'm talking to Ken, and David's right there. And so in front of everybody, Ken is like, so what's the plan? Like, we were working together again, although David was never, and like, David was the plan. So I'm like, Ken, why are you asking me that in front of everybody? And he's like, well, we worked together yesterday. You see, but it kind of gave a glimpse of maybe not totally having his pulse on how the strategy of the game was moving. And, but I mean, I thought that was a good sell to them. Let's go Gen X strong to the end, but I couldn't get them to do it past the Will vote.
Yeah, that's interesting. We didn't hear that much on the show about, I really want a millennial to win this or a Gen X to win this. That didn't come up. So it's interesting that you guys were actually discussing that.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a move I wanted to make. I mean, I was like, hey, let's pull this back together. You know, try to play to both of their egos, so to speak. We don't want some dumb thing over us, you know. That's embarrassing. I'm like, you think we want to sit there and let a millennial win? Look how dumb we're all going to look, you know? But I couldn't get up to so that was one of my other big ideas that I didn't get any traction on.
Well, and I guess this can actually be the last question from Twitter. And this, you knew Brett was going to show up eventually. His question is, ask Sunday if the octopus we ate on day 10 had more strategy than Ken.
He's so rotten. You're rotten, Brett. I am not answering that question because I'm too nice. I'm too nice to answer.
Sounds like that might have been a previous joke reused, maybe.
Brett, stop talking, Brett. That's what I need to say to him right now.
That's funny. So that's really all the comments. Will, do you have any other questions here, or what's going on with you?
Well, I guess we can talk just Ponderosa briefly. Just what was it like being out of the game? What was your mindset like? And just processing everything and that kind of state.
Well, first of all, when you first get there, your brain can't figure it out. So like, obviously I'm a huge fan of the show. So I was like, I can't believe I'm on Ponderosa. Like, I kept thinking, like, I hope everyone's nice. I knew everyone was going to be nice to me. I wasn't totally expecting Jessica to not talk to me at all, but I was pretty certain I was going to get a good reception, but I've watched them when people have walked in and everyone ignores you, and that would be like my worst nightmare. So first of all, I went in knowing I was going to get a warm reception. Zeke went to Town Special and got me Diet Coke because I love Diet Coke, which is so sweet. And then you get in there and you see yourself in the mirror. Holy Lord. My hair was green, gray. I had no idea what color it was. It was so weird. And so it's shocking to see yourself in the mirror. And then for a whole day, you're like, I have a fork. I have a plate. I have a bed. I have a pillow. I have a shower. I have a toilet seat. Do you know how much I missed a toilet seat? Like an actual spot to sit? I can't even tell you. Like, you guys don't know because you don't have to use them all the time. But a toilet seat is like heaven when you don't have a toilet seat. And like they sit down and everyone's like, what do you want to eat? You can have whatever you want. And you're like, am I sitting here? I'm, it's like you can't figure it out. And so I was like, I don't know what I want to eat. I'm just starving, so they ordered for me. And it's just everyone's asking you questions. You smell, but you want to talk to everybody so bad you don't want to go back and shower yet. I'll tell you a funny story. So I showered. Then they were all watching a movie, and I came watch the movie, and then I went back to my bungalow or whatever, and I was going to try and go to sleep, but my brain would not. Like, you can't shut your brain off. Like, what did I do wrong? What could I have changed? You want to be back in the game so bad, and you can't shut your brain off, okay? So I took 2 Ambien to try and help me sleep. But I didn't fall asleep. So I decided to walk to, like, the kitchen area and look for snacks. So I'm there, and then Zeke was there, and I sat on the couch, and I'm talking to Zeke, and he's pretty much like, something's wrong with you. And I was like, oh, well, I took 2 Ambien. And then I was not making any sense, apparently. This is what Zeke tells me. So and then there was a dog. And so Zeke walks me back to my room, and I was like, let the dog stay with me. And then the dog wouldn't stay in my room and whatever. And then I finally passed out. But Zeke was like, I called him my Ambien friend after that, because he's like, you made no sense, and I had to get you back to your room.
I wish that would have been your Ponderosa episode.
Yeah. So that was pretty funny. But, I mean, for me, I was glad. I mean, I wanted to be in the game, but it was nice to have a couple days of just downtime to myself before I had to go back to the real world. Because it's such a dramatic change. I mean, if you think about anything, like after 21 days, it's a habit. But you think about being out there for 35 days, it messes with your head. And it's like, I was glad I had a few days. And, I got a bug bite the day I was like right before we got on the boat to come home. And by the time I got to Minnesota, my elbow was swollen, like from here to here, like red and hot. And 2 days later, I was delirious, and I could hear myself not making sense. And I ended up with 104 fever in the hospital with a staph infection. I was in the hospital for a week. I had 2 surgeries on my elbow to get rid of the staph infection. And so that's what I did when I got home. I watched the Kerrang finale from my hospital bed.
Oh my gosh. So you had the infection at Ponderosa, you got it?
Well, I got it like literally probably an hour before we got on the boats to leave to come home. I got some kind of a bug bite.
Oh my God.
And it just got puffier and swollen and red. And then I ended up septic, and I was in the hospital for a week, 2 surgeries.
That is insane.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I want to ask, my last question for you is, what was your whole casting process like? Were you somebody who applied all the time? Were you kind of just happened to be right place, right time? What was it like for you?
Well, I applied in 2013 with my son for Blood versus Water. And I got a call back, and they ended up having me send in just a video of myself, but then it didn't go anywhere. So the next year, which was 2014, I think, or 15, I sent in another audition video. I was actually floating down the Mississippi River with my sister-in-law. I was like, hey, this make a good audition video. I'm in the middle of the river. And we made one and sent it in and got a call back. I had to remake it because I had sunglasses on. And then ended up getting invited to LA and going through the whole process. So really it was my second audition that I got called in. I think for this particular season, I didn't know it, obviously, but I think because if they knew they were going Gen X versus millennials, I'm a pastor of millennials. So I feel like, plus I have 2 of my own. So I felt like, I think the cancer story didn't hurt because they're always looking for people with a story. And I've been on TV, like on local, news stations here on doing segments a lot and stuff. So I feel like I come across well on camera. And I think those things help me, get on the show.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's always fun. We always hear so much recruiting. And we've talked to all 5 people, and I don't think any of you, I think all of you were like trying to get on so bad.
Yeah, I think that's one reason the season was so spectacular, at least in my mind, is we were just all huge fans of the game. Big fans. We knew what was going on. We knew what strategy was. And I think because we were big fans, we respected the game so much. And I think that's why it didn't get as personal as it maybe has in other seasons, because we would make moves against each other, go back to camp and be like, good move, you guys, you got me, to the opposite alliance all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just because we really did respect it and see it, like it was a game.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I love the season so much. Everyone was really kind of just okay with playing the game and then, still being friends with everybody and just having this lighthearted attitude made it really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I made it enjoyable to play, I'll tell you that much. After that, I'll tell you something funny about Brett. The rock draw where I was like, told him to quit talking because he was being mean to David. So we got back to the beach that night, and me and David and Brett and a bunch of us were standing there talking. And so I go, hey, David, Brett has an apology to make to you. Don't you, Brett?
And he did it? He just did it on the spot? You mommed him into it?
Yeah, totally. And he did it.
That's great.
I could say that with him because, I love him.
That's great. That's funny.
Yeah.
So, Will, do you have anything else, or before we let Sunday go here? We've almost hit our 2-hour mark. All of these interviews have been so long.
Oh, that went really fast.
Yeah, it's awesome that you guys are so open to talking with us and going on for as long as you guys do. It's amazing. We love hearing from all you guys, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone who's been listening. And yeah, I think that wraps it up for me, Phil. Anything you got?
No, Sunday. Is there any last thing you want to say before you go here?
Well, just don't ever give up on your dreams. That is my story. Doesn't matter how old you are, if you're a mom, if you're 18, as you saw Will and I get out there, don't give up on your dreams. That's what I'd say.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's great.
Whether you're a millennial or a Gen Xer.
Exactly. Thank you guys so much. This was so much fun. And thank you to everybody that sent in comments. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on and being here with us. This was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, and I guess we have no more interviews scheduled, but we'll let you know when we do. Subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, that's it. We'll see. I guess we'll do season rankings at some point. That will probably be our next podcast. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Sunday, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, guys.